Hi, in this video I'm going to give a basic demonstration of how to use the MultiTrack Sequencer. To start with, I'll open one of the examples that comes with the TX Modular System. It's called MultiTrack Sequencer Bach MIDI, and it's in the folder Specific Examples. In this example, a MIDI file of a Bach two-part invention was imported into the MultiTrack. On the left are all the modules in the system. As well as the sequencer, there's a modelled piano and a modelled bowed instrument which play the two instrument parts, and there's a reverb as well to add some space. I'll fully open the MultiTrack using this orange button. I'll let it play a bit so you can hear what it sounds like. Now I'll give a quick tour of the layout. In the top row are the buttons for controlling the sequencer: play, record, stop, etc. These checkboxes allow you to link the sequencer to the sync start and sync stop buttons, which are at the top of the window. There's also a global mute switch. In the third row, you can decide which tracks to show. All tracks, like it's doing now, or a particular track if you want to edit it. The other controls let you add a note or controller track, change the BPM, and set the number of beats in a bar. The fourth row sets various positions in the timeline: start and stop positions, the start and end of the current time selection, and the start and end of the loop, and whether the looped playback is on. One thing to point out is that all times are shown in beats and bars, not seconds, since the BPM can be changed at any time. If I turn loop on, the green loop line becomes much thicker in the timeline. I'll turn it off again for now. In the next row, the snap controls force time selections to be at the start of the beat or part of a beat. Bars sets the time range that is being displayed. I can change or move it around to show different times. The current time is shown in bars and beats. If I click anywhere in the timeline or on any track, I can change the current time. If I want to start playback from the new time, I need to turn off Play from Start before starting the sequencer. Now I can start it from any position. The marker jump buttons are useful for jumping to a particular position in the timeline, and these buttons let you add or delete markers. I'll demonstrate. If you don't put a name when you add a marker, it will show the time as bars and beats. If you click and drag in the timeline with the Shift button pressed, the time selection will be changed and colored yellow. One more thing you can do on the timeline is to press Command and drag to change the loop start and end. The green loop line will show the new loop. Below the timeline are the individual tracks. Controller tracks have blue shading underneath the controller values. Note tracks have coloured lines representing each note. Here they are orange, but their colour depends on the note velocities. This little blue button is for hiding or showing a track. The track number can be changed to move it to a different place in the list, so you can change the overall track order within the sequencer. Each track can be given a name, and there's a label showing if it's a controller or note track. There's also a unique track ID, which doesn't change even if you change the track order. These buttons are for editing or deleting a track. In the next row, the Select button is for selecting a track. Tracks that are selected are shown in yellow, and if I turn off selection for some tracks, you will see there are gaps in the yellow time selection. These buttons are to select, mute, or unhide all the tracks. One reason that selection is useful is that if you want to run a process on a certain track or on certain multiple tracks, you can just select the ones that you want. Multi-track processes are shown below the tracks and can be made bigger or smaller with this button. The processes include things like copy, cut and paste, interpolation and smoothing for controller tracks, and opening or saving tracks as MIDI files. One particularly useful process is undo edit for selected tracks. This is because each track keeps its own edit history, so if you make a recording using multiple tracks and then want to undo the recording, you can run this process. In each track, here you can turn on monitoring and recording. The offset will delay the track by a certain number of beats. On track 7, I've added an offset because the bowed instrument has quite a long attack. If I didn't add this offset to the piano, it would sound like it was playing a bit before the bowed instrument. The offset amount is highlighted in light blue if it's not 0. The mute button will prevent any recorded data on the track being played. It also turns the track grey so you know it's muted. Finally, the duplicate button makes a copy of the track with all its data and adds it directly after the current track. I'll make a copy of the piano track 7 and it will be added as track number 8. Now let's look inside each track. I'll edit track 1, which is the tempo track, and I'll go to the Inputs and Outputs tab. The output shows that this track will be sent to the BPM parameter of this module, MultiTrack Sequencer 1. Now I'll go to the Edit Selection tab. This shows all the controller values as blue dots, with the shaded blue area underneath showing the shape of the controller curve. In this track, the BPM stays steady for most of the track and then slows down right at the end, so I'll zoom in on the last few bars. On the left of the screen, it shows the maximum and minimum values allowed from 0 to 1, and in brackets next to the word out1, it shows BPM values. What this means is that for output 1 of this track, which is the BPM, the minimum and maximum range of values allowed is 1 to 999. If I change the quantized steps value to 998, which is the number of steps between 1 and 999, more values will now be shown on the left-hand side. If I focus on the lowest end of the BPM range using this range slider, we can see more clearly the BPM values in the slowdown section. I'll click in the timeline just before the slowdown, and then I'll press play. The BPM goes down gradually during the slowdown. I'll stop it for now. If I click anywhere on the background of the track, the current mouse position is shown in the yellow box, giving the time in bars and beats, as well as the current value at this mouse position. Out1 shows the value as beats per minute. If I drag in the track, it selects a time range, and any points inside the selection turn red, which means they're ready to be edited. If I select a single point, then all of its parameters show up in the yellow box and I can edit them. I can set the exact BPM in the Out1 box. Now I'll go to the Draw Points tab so I can draw some values in. If I turn on Snap to Grid and Quantize Value, then I can force points to be on the grid. I can click and drag to put the point at a specific time and value. If I turn on Mouse Drag Draws Multiple Points, then I can draw a freehand curve. The yellow box always shows the last place where the mouse was dragged. Below, there are undo and redo edit buttons if you make a mistake. Each track holds its own edit history, so you can always go back within the current track. Now I'll go to the Draw Line tab. Here you can select the shape of the line before drawing it. The curves that aren't called in-out will draw the opposite curve if you drag backwards in time. After drawing, you can go to the Edit Selection tab if you want, for example, to smooth or quantize what you've just drawn. You first need to select the points you want to edit. Copy and delete are on buttons with a box showing you how many points you've selected. The processes have lots of possibilities depending on what you need to do. Note tracks have different processes to controller tracks. Now I'll go to Track 2 Bode, to the Edit Notes tab. Here all the notes are displayed on a piano roll. I'll turn on Show Velocity Track to show all the note velocities underneath. Now if I drag over a single note, you'll see all its properties in the yellow box. I can drag the start or the end of the note. The velocity can be changed as well by clicking and dragging the black dot. The color of the note changes going from green to red depending on how high the velocity is. Now if I drag over multiple notes, I can change the velocities or note times of the whole group together. Now I'll go to the Draw Notes tab. I can turn on Snap for the note start or end, and then draw in the notes. So that's the end of part 1. I'll show you more in the next video.